Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I will be reading Chapter 27 of A Bachelor Husband by Ruby M. Ayres. Chapter 27. But ah, the little things for which I sigh, as each day passes by. The open book, the flower upon the floor, the dainty disarray, the sound of passing feet. Alas, the little things of every day. The silent eve, my sweet, the lonely waking. Alas, alas, for little things my heart is breaking. Chris woke up on the morning of his birthday with the very real hope in his heart that the post might bring him some message from Marie Celeste. She had never before forgotten his birthday. Even when he saw that there was no letter from her, he could hardly believe that there would be none later. He hung about his rooms all the morning, till young Atkins dragged him out by main force. "What's the matter with you that you're so fond of the house all at once?" he demanded disgustedly. He had previously had a heart-to-heart talk with their landlady and given her many instructions with regard to flowers and a lavish dinner that night. "For only you two gentlemen, sir?" she had asked, amazed, and Tommy had said, "No, I shan't be there. There's a lady coming." Then, seeing the faint disapproval of her eyes, he added, chuckling, "Cheer up! It's all right. She's his wife." He had told her enough of the truth to enlist her sympathy, packed his bag, and promptly proceeded to lose Chris as soon as he had got him out of the house. "I'll call for you at the club at 6, were his last words, "and mind you're there." Chris was there an hour before, chiefly because he had nothing else to do. He was irritated and annoyed, therefore, when the door porter informed him that Mr. Atkins had left a message to the effect that he could not get to the club, but would be at the rooms at 7. And would you be sure to be there, sir?" he added. Chris frowned as he turned away. He had a great mind not to go home at all, but to leave Atkins in the lurch. He thought it very shabby of him, all things considered, but it came on to rain, and the streets looked dull and uninviting, so he took a taxi and went home. Home. He echoed the word in his heart wretchedly. What a home for a man to go to when he might have everything in the world he wanted, and a wife to smile at him from the other side of his own table. He missed Marie 100 times a day. Her step about the house, her voice, even the sight of her slippers and small personal belongings. He took off his coat and hat in the hall, and went upstairs. There was a light in his room, and he could catch a glimpse of the table laid for dinner, and flowers. So many flowers there seemed. "I don't know why you chucked money away on all this tomfoolery," he said shortly, as he pushed open the door. "If you think because it's my bally birthday—" "Marie Celeste!" The last words were a great cry as his wife rose from his big chair by the fire. For a moment he stood staring at her with disbelieving eyes. He had longed for her so much all day, had been so hurt because she had forgotten his birthday. And now, here she was. She was very pale, but she was smiling. She had taken off her hat and coat, and looked very young and sweet in her little black frock, the dark hair curling softly about her face. Chris could not find his voice, could hardly breathe. He was so sure that if he spoke the spell would be broken, and that she would vanish from his longing eyes. Then quite suddenly she said, "I've come back, Chris, if you want me." "If I want you?" He fell on his knees beside her, and his shaking arms closed fast about her. He had meant to try and explain so many things, had planned so often in his mind what he would say to her, how he would humble himself and ask her forgiveness. But now that the time had come, there seemed no need for any of it. Kisses and broken words, and the clasp of arms that had ached with loneliness and emptiness were more eloquent than the finest speech could have been. It was only when the landlady had knocked 3 times to ask if she should bring dinner that Chris thought about appearances, and then he kept his wife's hand in his all the time the choice dishes which young Atkins had chosen so carefully were put upon the table. They pretended to eat a great deal, but it was only a pretense, and when the landlady had removed the last dish, in offended silence, Chris drew Marie Celeste down into his arms in the big chair. He passed his hand over her face and hair and soft neck. "I can't believe you're real," he said huskily. "How long are you going to keep me in my fool's paradise before you disappear again, Marie Celeste?" She raised herself and looked at him with mournful eyes. "I couldn't come before," she answered. "I had to be sure first." "Sure of me?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, of myself." The dark flush of pain swept across his face. "You mean that you had to be sure whether you still cared for me at all?" She looked away from him. I loved you when you were a little boy, years ago, she said in a tremulous whisper. I loved you when you went to Cambridge and snubbed me so dreadfully when you came home. Chris, I loved you when I married you. He raised her hands to his lips silently. He raised her hand to his lips silently. The words were sweet, but it was not all that he wished to hear, and she went on disconnectedly. Chris, you know, I thought you had only married me for the money. I never knew till that last night. He interrupted. I don't want to hear. It was all my fault. But I must tell you, she urged. There's something I must tell you. It was my fault. Everything that happened about Feathers. You made me half mad, I think, and it was I who asked him to take me away. It was I who asked him. It was much too honorable. I can't bear that you should blame him. I blame myself for everything. But his eyes searched her face with passionate jealousy. You said you hated me once, he reminded her morosely. Marie Celeste, when did you begin to care again? She looked away from him. Somehow she could not meet his eyes. There was a knowledge in her heart which she knew must always be a secret from him, the knowledge of her queer, inexplicable love for Feathers. It was still there in her heart, and always would be, she knew. But already time had begun to soften and change it, as time subtly changes the outline and coloring of a picture, without altering its beauty in the smallest degree. Perhaps even it was still there in her heart, and always would be, she knew, but already time had begun to soften and change it, as time subtly changes the outline and coloring of a picture, without altering its beauty in the smallest degree, perhaps even adding to it. I saw a photograph of you in his rooms, she whispered, and I knew then that whatever happened, I could not go. It was the truth, neither more nor less. The old loyalty and allegiance had called her back. Perhaps the old love, who knows? Chris's arms tightened about her. 3 times he had been so near to losing her, twice by death, and once by something that would have been so infinitely worse. He drew Marie down to him and kissed her with passionate thankfulness. He saved your life for me twice, he said. It was an all-sufficient answer to any doubt or suspicion that might still linger in his heart. And that is the end of chapter 27. Thank you for listening to this chapter with me, and come back shortly to hear the end of this book. Have a great day.